Okay, guys, in this lesson, we're going to talk about two-way tables. And again, we're going to be looking at two different or sometimes even three different variables involved. We're going to learn how to interpret a two-way table and create a two-way table. We will be doing a lot of calculating in percentages, so you will want a calculator for sure. So a two-way frequency table simply just displays counts of two or more categorical variables. It's a good visual when you're taking a survey. The categories are labeled at the top and on the left side. So here we are comparing folks that take gifted classes or on-level classes to having extracurriculars or no extracurriculars. So if you take more gifted classes, would you more or be less likely to have extracurriculars? So we're just going to compare those two to see if there's an association. So let's talk about the parts, okay, of a two-way table. Again, our categories are along the top that make columns, and then we have categories that are along the left that create rows. And let's take a look. We have several totals here. So here at the bottom right, this total is the total amount of people that were surveyed. So we have 60 students that we surveyed. Then we can see that we have totals for the columns. So here we have 38 people that are taking gifted classes, and we have 22 that are taken on level in our survey. And then we look at the rows and we can see the total for each row. So 40 people take extracurricular activities and 20 take no extracurricular. So you have three totals. The total, which is the total of the survey in the bottom right corner, and then you have your totals of your rows and the total of your columns. So make sure you remember columns go up and down and rows go left to right. So now let's talk about a few vocabulary terms. Joint frequency pretty much just means the initial count of your survey. This is where the columns and the rows join together, and these are called the joint frequencies. Marginal frequencies are the sums of the initial count by row and column. So margin, just like the margin of your paper, is just the edge around your paper. So the margin frequencies, the margin count, the margin numbers are the ones around the margin. It's the totals of the rows and the totals of the column. Now 60 is not considered here in this example, is not a marginal frequency. So the lower right cell is not labeled as a marginal frequency, only these totals and these totals. So is there an association with being in gifted classes and taking extracurriculars? So really we're just saying, could I make a prediction with the data that if you're in a gifted class, could I predict that you are going to have extracurriculars or not have extracurriculars, okay? And so just looking at the count doesn't really give us a lot of information. It can be misleading. So we are going to divide our two-way tables into three other tables. So we have the regular frequency table that we just looked at, and then we are going to have a table with the same data, but we are going to calculate the percentages using the total. So this is dividing by the total survey. So then we're going to have another frequency table, relative frequency table, where we divide by the total of the rows. So in this example, I will be dividing 30 by 40 and 10 by 40. So we'll be getting the percentages by row. And then the third type of relative frequency table is dividing by the total in the column. Now the term relative frequency just means percent. So if you see the word relative frequency, you just need to think percent. And remember, percent is the part divided by the total. And yes, we have several totals, so that's what can make this lesson challenging is you have to know which total the question is referring to. Is it the total surveyed, or is it the total from a row, or is it the total from a column that you divide by? Nonetheless, it's the part divided by the total, and then you multiply that by 100, and that's what gives you a percent. So let's do the relative frequency for the whole table. That means we are dividing by 60. So relative frequency by the whole table. So we're going to have 30 divided by 60 times 100, 10 divided by 60 times 100. So when we do the whole table, the total we're using is the total surveyed. So here we know 30 out of 60 is half, which is 50%. So you just divide 30 by 60, and then you multiply it by 100 to give you 50%. So we're just dividing these out, then multiplying it by 100, and that is what's going to give you your percentages for the whole table. And of course, this is going to be 100% here. Okay, so we're going to do that for each of these. And I believe, yes, this is what we get. And if you get a decimal, round to the nearest tenth. And here is the relative frequency for the whole table, meaning we divided every cell by 60 times 100. Now let's get more specific, and we're going to look at a conditional relative frequency for rows. So we're going to use the total from the rows, which goes from left to right. So we're going to be dividing each row by its total and then multiplying, and then this total is 20. And then you multiply by 100 after you divide. Whoops, that should be 20. This, we're not going to use at all. So when we divide 30 by 40 and then we multiply it by 100, we're going to get 75%. Okay, and then we're going to get 25%. Again, don't forget to multiply it by 100. And then this is going to give us 100% because that's the total. 20 divided by 20, that will give us 100%. So again, you divide part by total, multiply it by 100. So this is conditional relative frequency by row, and that means I took the total of each row to get my percentages. So this would be questions like, of those that take extracurriculars, what percent have gifted? And that will be 75%. Or it could say, of those that do not take extracurriculars, what percent are in on level? And that would be 60%. So it all depends on what the question is asked. So let me back up here for just a second. So a question here would be of those that are surveyed. So anytime it says of those that are surveyed, that's when you're going to use the whole table percentage. I divided by everyone that was surveyed. For here, again, if a question begins with of those that have extracurriculars or of those that do not take extracurriculars, you're going to use the row frequency in this example. Now let's do the conditional relative frequency for columns. So this time the focus would be of those that are in gifted classes, what percent take extracurriculars? Or of those that are in on level, what percent are in extracurriculars? So it all depends on how the question is asked of which table, which statistic you're going to use. So we're doing by column, so we're going to be dividing by the total of the column. And then after you divide, you multiply it by 100. Here we are dividing by 22. And then once we do our calculations, these are our percentages. So if you were asked of those that are in on level, so I'm only focusing on the on level column, of those that are in on level classes, what percent are in extracurricular? And you're going to say 45.5%. Now, if the question was asked, is there an association of those that are in on level? Is it likely that they are taking extracurriculars or not? And these two percentages are too close to say that, yes, I could make an association of on-level class students taking extracurriculars or not. I can't make a prediction because these two percentages are too close together. However, if I were asked, is there an association of being in gifted and taking extracurriculars or not? And I'm going to say yes. If you are in a gifted class, you are way more likely to take extracurriculars than not. So there is association of being gifted and taking extracurriculars or not. So I would say yes, there is an association because there's a big gap between these two percentages. That's why it's important to calculate percentages, and especially by row and column, depending on what question is being asked. So this is the end of our lesson, and I hope this helps.